Hello, everyone, and welcome to Headwise, the weekly podcast and videocast of the National Headache Foundation. I'm Dr. Lindsay Weitzel. I'm the founder of Migraine Nation, and I have a history of chronic and daily migraine that began at the age of 4. We have an exciting episode today. I am here with author, certified neurologist, headache specialist, and Ayurvedic practitioner, Dr. Trupti Gokani. Hi, Dr. Gokani. How are you?
Hello, Lindsay. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Dr. Gokani has authored 2 books in the field of Ayurvedic medicine, stress, and headache. One is soon to be published. Today, we are going to ask her to share with us some of her philosophy, which is super interesting, and she's such a fun person. So I can't wait for all of you to benefit from what she has to say. Dr. Gokani, why don't you begin by sharing with us and everyone that's listening, what made you pursue headache medicine and your other subspecialties?
Yes, great. So first, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. The
Thanks for being
original
here.
journey, thank you. So the original journey of headache medicine began with being a resident and kind of sitting there. I still remember the chairman doing a presentation on migraine. And I sat
Mhm.
back, and this is, 25, 30 years ago. And I sat back and I thought, wow, that's fascinating. And the way he described the phases of headache and the phases of just how there was at that phase mainly vascular, constriction, dilation of the
Right.
blood vessels, understanding of serotonin as part of the mechanism, this
Hmm.
idea that triptans play this role in migraine. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. These different kind of variants of the attacks, and then also how the attack itself unfolded. The peripheral sensitization, central sensitization. I thought it was so fascinating. And then, at that time we weren't talking about inflammatory peptides, yet I felt like there was still more to learn. And that was
Hmm.
something that I thought in neurology would be fascinating is to explore more. So I love the fact that there was this uniqueness to the attacks themselves and this interesting kind of way that they showed up. And then, being a woman, I have to say that it affected so many women. In the clinical practice, when I was a resident, my last year, I ended up seeing a lot of the women because people knew that I was interested in headache. And I
Hmm.
got to meet so many interesting women with stories and stories and stories about their pain and how the pain got generated. And I was just so fascinated with how to really conquer the pain with them. My mom
Hmm.
had severe migraines, so I have to say that played a role. I remember coming home from high school and seeing her laying on the couch and not
Hmm.
having the tools. This is
Right.
before triptans were available.
Mm.
And so that's how I got into the migraine kind of world. And then Ayurveda is a little bit of a different angle. I'm happy to share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Can you just explain what Ayurvedic medicine and Ayurveda are?
Sure. Yeah. Because people are probably wondering, like, how is she a board certified neurologist and an Ayurvedic practitioner? Where does that
Right.
come together? East meets West here. So, the training in neurology and the training in headache was something that was actually the background to that was my interest in Ayurveda. And interest in Ayurveda came as a first year medical student. So,
Hmm.
even though I'm Indian of origin, I was born in East Africa and I did not grow up with the typical Indian kind of, you know, um, teachings in terms of
Okay.
Ayurvedic wisdom is originating from India, but I didn't grow up with Ayurvedic medicine. Okay.
Okay.
So my dad was a conventional Western doctor, and
Hmm.
I learned medicine the Western way. Showed up in medical school, first year of med school, started having problems sleeping. And within about a couple months, I wasn't sleeping at all. I was going to quit med school. My dad took me to a psychiatrist, and basically within 10 minutes, he diagnosed me with depression. And he said, "Here's Prozac." And I said, well, I'm not depressed. If I could sleep, I wouldn't feel this way. And then I decided to like rip up the prescription, go to the bookstore,
Hmm.
and found all these interesting books on mind, body, spiritual healing. Came
Hmm.
across the works of Deepak Chopra. And it was in that kind of journey that I discovered where my imbalance was with my sleep. And I believed that there was something beneath it at the surface, and I wanted to kind of discover what it was to get myself to restore my sleep again. Well, I studied Ayurveda on my own in medical school and found myself sleeping again within about 2, 3 months with following some of the principles. And so, what I loved about Ayurveda was this idea that the mind and the brain and the way we thought influenced how we were.
Hmm.
Emotions and the physical were one. So, when I went through my residency and learned about the different disciplines I can go through, migraine to me was almost like the same interplay, the mind and the
Hmm.
thoughts and the emotions and pain. And so Ayurveda was kind of my first love. And then headache, I think, and migraine fit right into that. And I think it kind of allowed me to blend both of these disciplines together.
Okay, that
Yeah.
is very interesting. And I bet that many of our of the people in our audience didn't know what Ayurveda was. So I'm glad that you have clarified all of that for us.
Sure.
So I do want to ask because the book that's about to come out, this is actually the 10-year anniversary of your first book, which was called
Yeah.
The Mysterious Mind.
Yeah.
The book that is about to come out is called Stress RX, which I
Hmm.
love. It sounds really cool. It rolls off the tongue.
Thank you.
And so we do want to ask, and our topic today is stress, and we're
Yeah.
looking at stress, migraine, headache. But I have to be honest, I get a little bit annoyed when I
Hmm.
listen to people talk about stress and migraine
Hmm.
because they very rarely say why it's a trigger
Mm.
or really give me any input that I haven't heard before on that. So,
Yeah.
do you have any input onto why stress is a migraine trigger for some
Sure.
people?
Yeah, and I'll step a little further, and I'd like to just delve a little deeper in this Ayurvedic concept. So Ayurveda, Ayur means life, and Veda
Hmm.
is wisdom. So it's the wisdom of life. Okay.
Hmm.
So here I am stumbling across these books and realizing that I didn't have a lot of wisdom of my life, a wisdom of myself. What Ayurveda does and how it defines stress, and this is why for me this was so powerful in my early 20s and kind of transformed me, to be honest with you, in the way I thought about headaches, pain, disease is
Hmm.
that Ayurveda defines stress as a disconnect from yourself. It's a
Hmm.
disconnect from your soul, your bliss
Hmm.
state. And when you get kind of pulled out of that blissful being, that kind of you that's healthy, happy, harmonious, and disease free, you get pulled out of that state. That's that degree of separation. Here's
Hmm.
bliss, here's authentic state, and here's where we are. That is what stress is. So in Ayurveda, we're made up of five elements: air, space, fire, earth, and water.
Hmm.
At birth, we're more one type. So one type would be the air and space type. We call them the vatas. Mover, goer, doer, talks a lot, moves a lot, loves to be into things that are musical or artistic or creative. Vatas are great at selling things. They're like just love to talk and speak and travel. Likes different things. Put it this way, you could
Hmm.
not put a vata behind a desk. They'll get bored behind, just sitting in a cubicle. I'm thinking the
Right.
traditional office spaces that you and I, kind of know about.
Hmm.
Now, don't really exist as much anymore, but those like little cubicles. Like you couldn't put a vata sitting in a cubicle doing accounting work. They would be like, no,
Hmm.
thank you, because they're just movement going creative. The pitta is a little bit more muscular, determined, type A's, organized. They're the ones that will plan things, organize, very clear speaking. They will tell you what they're thinking. They have no problem with speaking the
Hmm.
truth. So pitta is a little more competitive. Play a little tennis or pickleball with a pickleball with a pitta. You're going to know who they are because they're going to be really kind of competitive with you. That's their nature. They have a
Hmm.
fire and water type to them. And then the earthy type, a little bit bigger frame, that's a kapha, earth and water type, grounded, calmer, doesn't
Hmm.
like the big parties. The Vata loves to be around tons of people, life of the party. Kapha's like, let me just sit at home and read a book. I could
Right.
really not want to be around a million people. And the Kapha are the homemakers, love to be in the garden, love to be cooking, give you the biggest hugs ever. The Kaphas,
Hmm.
they're earth elements. So the
Hmm.
goal in life when you're born, if you're a Vata Pitta Kapha, is to live in alignment with that. Okay. Well,
Right.
life comes in. Things happen. Early childhood things happen. Things in your teens happen. Life happens. And you know what? We get pulled out of alignment. So in Eastern medicine, Ayurveda, and this is what was like the aha for me, was that my sleep issues, my insomnia was basically a disconnect from who I was. Now, the challenge is figuring out, well, how do I get back there and how did I get disconnected? And that's where the work begins. So
Hmm.
stress in Eastern medicine to me is really getting a sense of yourself. Who are you? A baseline. Who are you out of alignment? And what steps, be it what I eat, who I spend time with, my career, what steps do I take to get back in to me again? What does it
Okay.
take? And that's it.
Okay. That was super awesome and super interesting. I love that explanation of stress. And I'm not sure how my next question really fits in now, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm so
Yeah.
curious what your answer is.
Sure.
My next question was going to be, does it matter
Uh-huh.
in the idea of stress and headache or stress and migraine if the
Yeah.
stress is physical, mental, or emotional?
Good question. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so let's talk about stress and migraine, right? So the question
Hmm.
is, and I think you were saying earlier, like I get kind of annoyed. Like when someone tells me I'm stressed and the stress is triggering my headache,
Yeah,
first of all, oh, what do I do about it? What does that even mean? I'm so tired of hearing
right.
it. Yoga, breathe, whatever. I can't, done it before and it's not working. So this is the idea. And I totally get that. I can appreciate that. So when you think about stress and you use that word, I think in a way of defining disconnect
Hmm.
from baseline.
Right.
Anytime I do something that pulls me away from my me. So, for example, let's give an example. Let's say I decided to skip my lunch today. Okay. I mentioned earlier it's a warmer day here in Chicago, kind of hot and 80 degrees in Chicago for April is unusual. And I skipped lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those two things, hot day and skipping lunch, are going to increase in me, in anyone that does this, more fire energy. I'm going to just naturally get a little fired up. Because why? My
Mm-hmm.
digestive enzymes are kind of building, the heat is building, the sun is kind of heating me. I'm already a little fiery. So,
Mm-hmm.
what could happen this afternoon? I could start getting snappy. I can get irritable. I could start
Mm-hmm.
feeling a little burning. I could feel a little right-sided throbbing because fire, by the way, goes to right side of the
Mm-hmm.
body. I
Okay.
might feel a little bit of my stomach starting to get queasy and nausea. You see, if I'm in that kind of vulnerable state, let's say I'm a week before my period, or I'm perimenopausal, or I didn't sleep that great the night before, that is where that stress, that disconnect with self will then trigger the migraine.
Okay. All right.
So that's how we can use that word in the way to help us is like doing things that will pull yourself out of alignment are going to create what we call the stress behind the headache. And the stress is really just saying, I'm just too fired up. I'm too pitta. And I need to
Mm-hmm.
bring myself down. Maybe I should have some coconut water. Maybe I should go and if I haven't eaten lunch and it's 2 o'clock, sit down, settle in, and chew and eat a really nice, nutritious meal and tell myself this is too important. I need to sit down and eat. Maybe I need to put some cooling ice, ice pack around, cool, kind of head ice pack on, or do something to cool myself down because I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
heated. So, but you want to catch it as early as you can. You want to
Mm-hmm.
catch it when you start getting irritable, when you start feeling that throb on the right, when you start feeling the heat, maybe the little nausea. That's the key, not wait, because then sometimes we wait and then it gets challenging and the meds don't treat as well. So that's, kind of an example of that, if that makes sense. So I think every migraine, to be frank with you, I think every migraine is due to stress, though I think we need to understand what stress really means. It's
Mm-hmm.
doing things that push us more out of alignment with ourselves.
Okay. Can you talk to us about your view of triggers? Are
Yeah.
they emotional activators?
Yeah.
Any kind of activator, anything that it brings us out of alignment? What is your view of them?
Yeah, so to kind of tie into the last thing, the triggers and stress, and one thing to really say here is that what was a big aha for me was that the mind and the body are one. There isn't a
Mm-hmm.
separation in Eastern medicine. That how we think, how we feel dictates how our physical body is. Meaning that if my neck is tight, what might be happening underneath it is I'm anxious, I'm worried. I might be feeling that mind spinning, that vata windy mind. And that's going to make me kind of go into a little bit of a freeze state. So my neck gets tight. So the
Mm-hmm.
physiology directly links to the mind. And then the trigger is back to kind of what I was alluding to a little earlier. It's that unique activator. And it could be maybe back to this mind spinning. Maybe I got a message from, a sibling about
Mm-hmm.
something that's worrisome with a family member. And I start to go into a spin about it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to focus on work, but my mind is really nervous and wondering, is this person okay? And I start to gonna move into state and moving into a free state because I'm worried. So you see how the neck starts to get activated. And then, as we know, the trigeminal branches connect to the cervical. We start to wind up. And then, let's add on the skipping the lunch while we're at it, Let's say I skip lunch. There goes a CGRP production because that's an inflammatory peptide. So you see
Mm-hmm.
how I get wind up, my mind gets activated, I'm emotionally bothered, my neck is getting tight. I'm starting to activate those nerves that activate the migraine pattern that my body knows how to create a migraine. It's learned it really well because I've had them over and over again. And then I skip lunch. You
Mm-hmm.
see, you got two activators here. You got the call,
Right.
you got the skipping lunch, and then that's what it's hot outside. So you see how boom, 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 one after another, you start to kind of get activated, and then the migraine comes. It didn't come out of nowhere. It did
Mm-hmm.
not, it never comes out of nowhere. I'm just going to say, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's always a step by step. You can break it down. And what Ayurveda helps you do is say, what was the first thing that was your activator? What was the first trigger? First trigger
Mm-hmm.
was the phone call. And listen, we don't say that we blame it on the trigger. I mean, goodness gracious, we're going to take the phone call from the sibling who's talking to us
Mm-hmm.
about someone. So we're going to take that phone call. But for us in our vulnerable state, that became a trigger.
Right.
If I didn't skip lunch that day, let's say we have another day where it's a really relaxed morning. It's a Saturday morning. I'm out in the garden. I'm enjoying. It's a beautiful day, getting caught up in the gardening, and I skip lunch, but I'm nowhere near my cycle, and I slept great the night before. I might not get a headache that day, even
Hmm.
though I skipped lunch. But in the scenario I just mentioned, I might get a headache because got the phone call. It just suddenly turned hot. I was trying to feel like, kind of controlling work a little bit. Maybe I was a little bit caught up with work. Those are the things that all became triggers for the migraine. So the
Right.
way we do is we kind of loop it into the state and we tie it into where we are. And
Right.
that's why the triggers aren't always constant. Sometimes the weather
Hmm.
does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the menstrual
Right.
cycle does, sometimes it doesn't, because it depends on us. It doesn't depend on the external, it depends on the internal
Hmm.
state and how we respond to the triggers.
Right. I love your books and I love your philosophies and everything. I think that maybe we should stop in case there's people in the audience who have a migraine diagnosis, might have some other things going on, whether they be anatomical or something where, they've been in pain for 20 years nonstop and they're wondering, they're like, I don't know, because I have days where I have no triggers and
Mm-hmm.
I eat everything just right. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
stop and say a little something to them in case
Mm-hmm.
maybe the actual migraine part, they're like, okay, I understand that were the triggers, but I'm always in pain. Do you have
Yeah.
anything to say to them in case that some of this isn't
Yeah.
ringing true for them?
Of course, and there's definitely, and my heart goes out to those that are struggling with chronic daily pain. And I was
Hmm.
alluding to more the intermittent episodes of pain, right?
Right.
When we're in a chronic daily, that's a different conversation because there's generally what we look at when we look at the brain is that there's almost, I think the easiest way I can think about this is like the brain is already kindled to be on. It's learned to
Hmm.
stay in a state of activation.
Hmm.
And then we look at what can we do if we can't bring that state down to zero?
Hmm.
What can we do to just to allow ourselves to bring it a little bit down closer to
Hmm.
there and maybe disengage from it a little bit.
Hmm.
So what I often do in that situation is a little different. I say, what can we do to add in to bring in a state where your system is a little disconnected from the pain activator? So easiest example I can give you, and I'll tie it to something a little different. When I was having those, sleep issues, what I wanted to do was, and I was that was a day, there was a nightly challenge I had for
Right.
months, right? So what I wanted to do was just, kind of really figure out the pain, figure out why I couldn't sleep, get every answer, take the right supplements, change the bed sheets, do everything to kind of change all of what I believe were the activators of that sleep issue.
Hmm.
And this is actually something I learned in the Ayurvedic textbook. It was a book by Deepak Chopra called Restful Sleep. And what he said was that you're going to start to like step away from the challenge you're having, whatever it might be it
Hmm.
sleep issues, headaches, and start to number one, be in a state where you just believe you're already sleeping well. You stay in
Hmm.
a state of like, I'm already pain free. And I know it's hard to hear because you're like, but
Hmm.
I'm not. And I remember thinking, I can't do this. I'm not. No, but you tell yourself you are. So this is where we get into a little bit of the energy, a little bit into the
Hmm.
things that won't be happening, you typically won't hear about in traditional textbooks of headache medicine, is you start to actually engage with the subconscious mind.
Hmm.
And and I teach people how to do that. You start to engage with a part of you that isn't the conscious part of you, the subconscious
Hmm.
part of you, and you have a conversation with that part of you. And you have a daily conversation with that part of you and let that part of you believe and have trust that you have that blissful, deep, balanced, pain-free soul, that being within you. What's at
Hmm.
the surface isn't who you are.
Right.
Okay, that's your protective nature coming up to defend you from what it believes is danger. And your body
Hmm.
is generating a pain signal daily. It believes you're in danger. Your body's just trying to
Hmm.
protect you. Your system is just trying to protect you. So we don't get angry. We don't get angry at that pain body. We don't get angry at like, I can't believe I can't sleep. No, you thank it for being there. You give it a little love. And then you say, how can I connect with a part of me that's the aspect of my being that is pain free, that sleeps
Hmm.
wonderfully well? How about I talk to that part every day? And I start to just already be in belief that I'm already pain free and that I'm already sleeping well. So step one is engaging with that. And I believe breath does help. I believe sometimes some essential oils help. I believe some just very gentle poses to open up the neck. And this is really to kind of drop those shoulders away, open up the hips, open up parts of the body that are holding because our emotions get stored in our physical body. So just
Hmm.
opening up and releasing where we're holding that stored trauma and that mind that is not working for us, that part
Hmm.
of us that's trapped in a state. We just want to, because when you're sitting like this or you're holding, the body's holding in a physical state, we used to say psychosomatic, but there's also somatopsychic, meaning my physical body can trigger my mind. So
Hmm.
if we can open up the body, we can kind of believe, let the subconscious believe we're okay. And we start to just do some really gentle things, just gentle things. And it could be grounding your feet on the grass. It could be saying a gratefulness. I'm grateful and thankful for. I'm pain free. If we could just start to bring things in that bring us into a belief that we're okay, that's a start. And I have seen some chronic pain patients by doing this daily start to bring their pain down. In fact, a coaching client who just graduated, she is actually pain free. And
Mhm.
part of it was, and she worked really hard for 6 months. It was not easy. I'm not going to tell anyone it's easy,
Mhm.
yet it is a daily dedication to self.
Okay.
It's a daily dedication to being well. And I think with the beautiful tools we have, because we have a lot of beautiful Western tools, if you tie these things together, this is where I want to blend East and West. I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
in one versus the other.
Right.
It's collaborative, right?
Right. I'm
Okay.
glad I asked. Yes,
I'm
thank you
glad you
for
did.
that.
Yeah.
Um, so your writings discuss things that
Hmm.
Western medicine does not really acknowledge, like life
Hmm.
force energy and the subtle body. What do these things mean to you and to the person with migraine or other types of chronic headache?
Yeah, so that was the piece that was missing in book one. I wasn't there yet 10
Mm-hmm.
years ago.
Right.
And I felt as though that was something Ayurveda had given to me, yet I really wasn't bringing it up in the clinical practice with patients, with just kind of in maybe more smaller, intimate conversations with friends and family, and then once in a while with patients. And then I was like, I need to write about this because it's just too important. And the ideal subtle body is that when you think, I think the way you imagine, if you pass like a wind turbine, and you've all seen those wind turbines, they kind of like, I was driving through the mountains and I saw those wind turbines, which are kind of spinning, they're collecting wind. And then what are they doing? They're taking that, air and space, wind, vata energy, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually moving it into electricity. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens in a similar way, our body takes in and actually itself is made up of energy that actually lights us up. That just in a similar way, the wind turbine converts something you don't see into something that you can see.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine your system being made up of energy because we're more energetic than we are physical. If you look at the atom, it has a nucleus and a proton and all that, the atom is mainly empty space.
Right.
So we have much more empty space than we do physical. And what
Mm-hmm.
holds us together is the energy within us. And that energy, we don't think about this, but we carry a certain vibration. Some are really high vibe, some are low vibe individuals. And when you have high vibe, it's basically that aspect of us that isn't the physical. It's that aspect of us that's that real kind of light force. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I think of energy, and when I learned in Ayurveda about energy, it's beyond the physical. So I'll give you an example. If I'm anxious, back to that, anxious state, my mind is racing. What happens is energetically, when I'm anxious, I go into freeze. Colon gets tight. Okay. I get constipated.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with what I ate. It had to do with my mind state because I move into a physiology. So energy, if you think of it, Einstein, energy equals mass times, MC squared. So
Mm-hmm.
energy and mass are interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is our energy body dictates our physical body and vice versa. So
Mm-hmm.
the goal is in Eastern medicine, it's called your life force energy. It's chi or prana. In Eastern medicine, Ayurveda, it's prana, and Chinese medicine, it's chi. When you do acupuncture, for example, it's opening up the flow, these
Mm-hmm.
meridians. In Ayurveda, that's opening up the nadis. It's all about flow of energy. And when we get blocked, it's because we're holding on, holding on. The physical body is holding, the mind is holding, and we get stuck in a state and then we don't light up a room, you
Right.
know? So we all have it flowing, but problem is it gets blocked, physically blocked, almost like your lymphatics are getting blocked. The energy gets blocked and stuck. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a piece that I don't think many of us realize because we're like, oh, we're like solid beings. But this solid being is made from empty space that then creates the physical. And the energy is what holds us together. So if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. No, it is something that we aren't used to hearing in
Right.
Western medicine, but
Yeah.
it is interesting the way you write about it in your book. It is interesting to be introduced into the idea of head pain.
Yeah.
And so I do encourage people to read it. Even, and I am someone that is in constant pain. So
Hmm.
that's why I wanted you to go ahead and speak to that group
Yeah.
out there. So let's move on to in the book that is going to be published soon,
Yeah.
Stress RX,
Mm.
excuse me, you discuss a concept termed the stress personality state, which you went into when we
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
already, and you talk about moving out of alignment. So when it comes to that and these other things like the energy body,
Hmm.
etc., do you feel there's a way, if we are trying to adopt some of these practices and look at stress in this manner, to discuss this with
Hmm.
Western medicine practitioners, for
Hmm.
example, so that we can make it part of our plan, part of
Hmm.
our treatment plan?
Hmm. Yeah. I think, the beauty is that most practitioners are, because of patients being more open and having more conversations, and because of social media giving us a lot more, I think, education around different topics. A lot of patients are going in and speaking to practitioners, and practitioners, kind of by no choice, are opening up to this idea. For example, the gut-brain connection, back in the first book I wrote about my daughter with her headaches and how she had food intolerances. And this is back in
Mhm.
2007, 2008, when no one believed gluten was bad or dairy could be a problem. And,
Right.
I was going against medical advice. And I found that, well, wait a second, there's this gluten issue and dairy issue in these, my daughter and all these people I'm seeing in the clinic. Removing that helped her tremendously with her headaches, and they kind of went away.
Mhm.
Well, now we're at a state where we've kind of gotten the gut brain thing connected. Most doctors know there's a gut brain link and all that. That's not new news anymore. It's very much known for a while. Now we're moving into the emotions and the energy and the fact that, oh, my emotions and my state of mind and this idea of the subconscious mind, that's all in that woo-woo space. But honestly, that's the space when you look at the ancients and how they viewed health. It was a balance of physical, emotional, spiritual body. It wasn't
Mhm.
just I'm free of disease and my body is strong. It was, how is your mind? It's all back to, when you think of Descartes and you think about Damasio and the Descartes, the Descartes era was like that he believed the thinking brain controlled everything. And
Mhm.
Damasio's like, wait a second, there's an emotional part to us too. Thoughts
Mhm.
don't regulate us. We have an emotion. That's why I use this three brain model. And I talk about that in
Mhm.
the second book. But this idea that we think, we feel, we digest, and each one of these has to be aligned. So to go back to this, how do you even bring this up with your physician? I think part of it is just saying, hey, listen, I know my labs are fine. I believe I have this diagnosis, yet there's more to me. And I feel
Mhm.
there's something is off. I'm not feeling connected. I'm not feeling vibrant. I'm not
Mhm.
feeling even just energetic. A lot of people tell me they
Mhm.
don't feel energy. They don't feel that, and part of it's cortisol and adrenals being overtaxed. But there's that subtle sense of like just happiness, that contentment, that sense. I just feel just kind of not connected to that part of me. That's that blissful part of me. I don't even know where that
Mhm.
is. I think it's helpful to at least mention it and to let a practitioner know there's a side of me that I don't quite know how to put words into. I just don't feel right.
Mhm.
And they may send you to a therapist, they may send you a coach. That's okay. At least you got the conversation going. Though, and if they
Right.
don't respond to it, I think it's important to kind of think about, well, maybe I should choose to see
Mhm.
someone that will help me with that. At least try, because I think the more we can all engage, I used to tell this all the time with my patients with a digestive. I was finding in my own clinic that they had gut issues. I'd say, go back and talk to your primary care doctor about this. Tell them you have a gluten issue. Tell them you got off of gluten, how much better you feel. Can you go talk to them about that? And this is, again, that was 2015 that book was
Right.
published. The studies are back to 2008. Doctors like, gluten, no, gluten's good for you. It's good. They used to say the whiter the bread, the faster you're dead. So there was like dark, bread is good for you. And so these
Right.
patients were like, no, I don't eat Wonder Bread. I don't eat that. I just think there's something in this grain that's a problem. But I would have my patients go back and talk to that physicians.
Right.
So yeah, there may be a little resistance. Be okay with that. If you can change to a physician that's more receptive, fantastic. But I know a lot of people can't. But I think then just know that you've had the dialogue and maybe it's something that you can seek out and get some help on, because there's a lot of people out there that do coaching work and that offer, videos and courses and things on this that I think I know it's a place to explore, because I've seen so many people turn around if they explore that space, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask another question, sort of related to Western medicine.
Yeah.
There's another concept you delve into as an author that I feel is important for us to stay healthy in a stressful world, and it's spirituality. This
Yeah.
obviously is not something that we usually talk about with our providers. How is spirituality helpful for our health and for our headache, etc.?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a functional medicine conference probably around the time when that book was published, first book, probably let's say 2015-ish. And I remember the provider walking up. I still remember who it was. He walked up to the stage and he said, how many of you in the audience ask your patients if they're spiritually connected, you know,
Hmm.
or follow spiritual practice?
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, gosh, that's an interesting question. And it, I believe he was spot on. If you look at the studies, and just look at the
Hmm.
studies, just Google spirituality and pain. Those that are more spiritual are more likely to recover and have better outcomes with their pain. It doesn't mean they get pain free. It simply
Hmm.
means that their pain processing, they seem to become more resilient and more able to handle challenges, be it pain or life stressors. That is clinically studied. There's data to prove that. What is really spirituality? It's believing in something bigger than yourself, believing there's some other divine force that's beyond you that's in kind of regulating your being and the world. And sometimes what happens is when people get spiritual, they get into a state of like, oh, I don't have to. This isn't just me having to fix this situation. There is a message behind this. There's someone, something, some force. It could be a specific individual that you're kind of visualizing and seeing, or it just could be life force energy. There's something that is here to support me through this challenging life that I'm living. And
Hmm.
sometimes that alone is so helpful when you're struggling and you're in pain to know that there's something bigger. Like when the pandemic happened, and I'm quite a spiritual person, but when pandemic happened, I still remember I was supposed to like leave my office and go on a flight and go do a speaking thing for a pharmaceutical company. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's all being canceled and I'm going home and we're just going to be in lockdown for 2 weeks was what I thought,
Yeah, yeah.
wow, this is interesting. And can't believe it's been 5 years since pandemic. I was
I
thinking
know.
about that. I was like, gosh, it's crazy. It feels like it was yesterday. So, but I remember like my initial response when you're spiritual, like in the initial thought was, this is happening for us.
Hmm.
You don't even go into the blaming, why me? Oh my gosh, I was preparing for that talk and I want to go deliver it. It's the whole, not why is this happening to me? It's just
Hmm.
why is this happening for us?
Right.
And that was my morning. Every time I woke up, universe, will you just share with me why is this happening for us? Why is this happening for us? Why is
Hmm.
this happening? If you start to ask yourself about the pain, why is this happening for us? And when I say for us, it's for you, your family, your friends. Why is this pain that you're experiencing happening? And
Hmm.
just when you ask the bigger questions, you get the better answers. When you ask
Right.
the little kind of like, was it the food I ate today? That's actually kind of a low, this kind of, we call it like a disempowering question. It's fine to
Right.
think about that. We don't obsess down here. We want to think bigger.
Hmm.
Start with those questions. Of course, make sure, do you have a gluten issue? Do you have anything you're triggering and you want to take out? Once you've kind of answered those or gotten some clarity around those, move up into the more empowering questions. Why is this happening? So, spiritually, what happens is you get to the bigger questions. You
Hmm.
start to say, okay, so maybe in this lifetime I was given this for a reason.
Hmm.
What's the message behind this? Maybe this for journey for me is to help others through their
Right.
journeys. Maybe this journey is for me is to help my kids become more resilient. Maybe this journey for me is to help. What is the, just ask
Hmm.
and just drop your shoulders and breathe and let that come. And answers will just come in a way that makes sense. And I think that to me is what spirituality does is it gives you that framework of being in a space. You don't have to have the answers yourself. You can
Right.
just ask the bigger question and then wait and receive. And beauty is that when you get more intuitive and you start to get more connected to what that answer may be, life becomes so much easier to live. Challenges, trust me, I've had a lot of challenges myself. I was kicked out of Africa. Like I was smuggled out of a
Hmm.
country when I was 6 months of age. And then we came over here with no money. We had nothing, cockroach infested apartment. And I wasn't asking those questions as a little kid, but I'm going to tell you, it was a
Hmm.
really challenging journey for my parents. And I grew up with a lot of intensity in the household because of that early trauma.
Hmm.
Yet I always just kind of felt like there was a part of me that even when I was given that Prozac, why is this happening for me? Why, wait, I'm not going to take a pill. There's something that's bigger
Right.
than this. And
Right.
so exploring. And then the stress personality is basically back to the disconnect. So if I'm in that vata excitable state, or if I'm in that pitta fiery state, or I'm in that earthy state, and the quiz is on the website so people can go there and take the quiz real quick. But the idea with the quiz, and the reason I did this is I want everyone to start, I believe it was Socrates that said unevaluated life. No, no. Mm,
Oh, I
an
know what you're talking
unexamined
about.
life. I just got it. An
Unexamined life.
unexamined life is not worth living. I was like,
Exactly. Yeah.
an unexamined life is not worth living. So examine yourself, and you'll start to say, oh, maybe I stay in that state because of,
Hmm.
and then ask a bigger question, why am I in this state? And that's kind of the start of it. And that's where we get some really interesting answers. And that's where we can make shifts that can dramatically improve the body and the pain,
Right.
you know?
That was great. Thank you so much. I'm glad I
Welcome.
asked that question. I
Me
want to
too.
ask you another question I'm going to go ahead and use a word that I learned directly from one of your writings.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what ama is in both the
Mm.
mental and physical sense?
Ama, it's one of my favorite words. Ama, AMA, Ama. It was funny. One of the Ayurvedic practitioners used to say, against medical advice, Ama. Ama is not that. So what Ama means, Ama is a toxin. And we think of toxins. We talk about toxins even in the Western world.
Hmm.
It is anything that is interrupting the flow of your being. It could be
Hmm.
an emotional toxin. It could be a physical toxin. We talked about lymphatics, we talked about energy flow. Anything that's blocking you from just being fully flowing and vibrant of mind and body. That's an ama, that's a toxin. So the toxin could be, yes, it could be gluten if your body doesn't break it down well. That could create toxicity in the gut and you can create inflammatory peptides around it. And then unfortunately it could lead to leaky gut and trigger inflammation around the body
Hmm.
if that is something you eat a lot of. So that could be a physical toxin. We know about different toxins like pesticides and things in the
Hmm.
environment that we inhale that could be toxic for us. Then that hormone disruptors and all those things that could be toxic. And then we have the emotional toxins. And the emotional toxins, I don't believe get enough attention. See, emotional toxin is something that happened to me 10 years ago that I'm still pissed off about. And I'm just going to still be pissed about it today because that just was not fair. And I don't care if that's been 10 years. I am still, you're going to talk about that story with me? I'm going to get really pissed off about it. That's an emotional toxin. And that actually is going to affect me today, even though it happened 10
Hmm.
years ago. So it
Hmm.
takes us away from being present because I'm living in
Hmm.
the past. So
Hmm.
anything that's disturbing either my mind or my body and creating that block of flow, that
Right.
block of vibrance. I bet that's the energy. That's where the energy flows. It's really energy flows when you don't carry toxins. And that's when
Right.
people walk in, they're just like, oh, or there's this one Vaja, this one guru that I was in a room with. And I'm telling you, I was like way back in the audience and I just felt his pleasantness and his
Uh,
beauty and his energy. And I was way back in the room.
uh,
I was like, God, he's way up there. And somehow the whole room was just captivated. And, this is an individual that spent a lot of time clearing out the ama of the thoughts of the body, eats clean, thinks everyone's good, believes good in others. There's no
uh,
polarizing thoughts in that man's body. You know what I'm saying? Just everything was love and peace and love
uh,
and good energy. And so when you kind of operate from that, you actually can release a lot of things that are holding, you back. And so the toxin in Ayurveda we call it panchakarma. It's 5 systems cleansing. And one of the systems is the colon, but you're cleansing your sweat glands, you're cleansing, actually, it's called virechana, forced emesis. And when you think about migraine and
oh,
vomiting, think about the CGRP buildup in the gut. That's
oh,
actually clearing ama.
oh,
That's actually clearing.
interesting.
So, like in
Okay.
Eastern medicine, you wouldn't give a nausea med. They'd
Hmm.
say throw up. And a lot of people you talk to migraine patients, they feel better after they throw up, right? Because you're clearing the toxins, you
Hmm.
know? And then there's a cleansing of the physical body, but then the cleansing of the mind. Who do we need to forgive? Who
Hmm.
can we be more loving towards? How
Hmm.
can we be more compassionate in our words, our language, our thoughts to ourselves and to others? Very often we're
Hmm.
tough on ourselves. The perfectionistic pleasers out there, anybody? We're kind of tough and intense on ourselves. So the
Hmm.
first part is to be forgiving and loving to yourself and then to others. And that actually clears that ama. And
Hmm.
forgiveness is probably one of the toughest things for a lot of people I've worked with have chronic symptoms. But that, my father did this or this one did that, and I get it. I'm not condoning behavior. That was negative, terrible behavior, though it is not helpful for us to carry it because it actually affects our energetic system, which then energy converts to mass. It then affects our physical bodies. So
Hmm.
that's the piece. If we can start doing some housekeeping there, the physical body will improve. I've seen it time and time again. You can look at Bruce Lipton's work. There are plenty, Candace Pert, plenty of bright individuals that have studied the effect of the subconscious mind and the emotional body on the physical. Gabor Mate is another one. A lot of great people out there. And I just have to thank all of them because they opened my eyes to this, right?
Hmm.
Ayurveda and then reading all this work, Louise Hayes, another one, you start to learn about the importance of clearing the mind. And Ayurveda has said that 5,000 years ago. It's about time we start listening to some of the teachings and really
Hmm.
practicing it, right? Uh, you
Right.
know. hmm
So I think I'll just move on to that was my last question for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic of stress and your approach to stress and headache and migraine before we go?
We covered so much. I think, overall, I'd like anyone that's listening to know that there's always, always space for improvement and
Hmm.
feeling better. No one
Hmm.
has ever, I've really, like I was saying earlier, managed some incredibly challenged individuals who have been to some of the top centers in the country, who have been on so many pharmaceuticals, who have tried so many Eastern medicine approaches, and then kind of gave up and said, I don't know if there's anything left for me. There's always space to move forward. And what I do know with my 20 some years of experience is that a lot of it will be found in more the subtle energy body, the body that you're not seeing physically.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds tricky to explore that, but I'd say start with just simply getting to know. If you can learn a little teeny bit of Ayurveda, that's not that challenging. I started learning it in my 20s. Just learn a little bit about what state. Are you a little excitable? Are you a little too fired up? Are you a little too earthy? Just start with that and then start to kind of move a little further. And you can look at, for book number one, I talk about it more now than I did before, but a little bit like, how did you get into that state? Is it maybe if you're fired up, do too many spicy foods, you're too windy, maybe you're eating too many cold foods, too earthy, maybe too many heavy, foods like the gluten and dairies. Start with like some simple things and then kind of keep yourself open and receive and realize there's more to the story and realize that you can get better and realize there's no individual out there that can't improve their pain body. I've seen it over and over again. It does
Mm-hmm.
take daily dedication though, right? Though
Mm-hmm.
if you're open to it, why not explore yourself? There's no one more interesting to learn about than yourself, I think.
Right.
And then you can empower other people, your kids, your family members, your significant others. Like I feel like my goodness, I'm so grateful that Ayurveda found me back in my 20s because I've been able to help so many people, family members
Mm-hmm.
included. Hey, have you thought about it this way? And sometimes just a few shifts, it's amazing how the body can release.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to give people hope and faith that they can get better because they can.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a wonderful episode, and thank you everyone for listening in. Please join us for the next episode of Headwise. Bye-bye.